Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Kim Mabon, and I am the board chair for the Corona Chamber of Commerce and owner of Creative by Design. We're excited you are here to join us today, and I'd like to share a few announcements before I turn it over to Jeff, who will be giving us a summary on the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill. Today's event is sponsored by Jim Dorsey Photography. For over 30 years, Jim has photographed the Inland Empire and has continued to do what other photographers don't want to do. He offers unlimited time, unlimited image packages for fair and affordable pricing. He encourages you to call everyone else and then call him. Thank you, Jim Dorsey, for sponsoring today's meeting. As a reminder, please use the chat button to ask any questions. Send your questions to the chamber host and we will verbally ask them at the appropriate time. Our holiday mixer and toy drive is coming up on December 9th. This will be held from 6 to 9 p.m. at Tacos El Fuego. It is $20 admission and open for Corona Chamber members only. Sponsorships are available. Please visit the link on your screen for more information. Our last Coffee with the Entrepreneur of the Year is coming up on December 13th. We are excited to announce that the speakers will be the incredible Stacy and Ray Bass. This duo founded Boost Training in 2011 and since then have seen it reach incredible heights. Register now to come hear them speak at the bit.ly on your screen. This is a reminder to grab your tickets for the Jimmy Kimmel LA College Bowl on December 18th. The game kicks off at 4:30 p.m. at SoFi Stadium, but the gates open early for lots of fun activities. Tickets are on sale now for as low as $40. Nonprofits who are members of the Chamber can also partner with us to promote the game as well as their nonprofit and receive earnings from the ticket sales. Also, don't forget, Anthony is shaving his beard right off when we sell 400 tickets. Learn more at the bit.ly on the screen. If you are a guest and not currently a member of the Corona Chamber, we welcome you to join our Chamber family. Meetings like these are just one of the many benefits to being part of an active, thriving organization like the Corona Chamber. Please outreach to our Membership Development Coordinator, Robert Yanez. He can review the many incentives for both joining and referring business to join. Or if you're already part of the Chamber family and you want to learn about the many ways the Chamber can help you market your business, please contact our Marketing and Sponsorship Specialist, Tammy Harwick. I would now like to introduce our legislative advocate, Jeff Gibson. He keeps up with all of the movement happening locally, regionally, statewide, and federally. With Jeff's thorough analysis, he helps us act timely on projects and initiatives that can help make a difference in shaping our community. As owner of Occidental Communications Group, his knowledge of complex political issues and the great relationships he has built ensure that the Corona Chamber has all the tools necessary to be effective on behalf of the business community. Please help me welcome Jeff Gibson to share a legislative update.
Thank you, Kim. I appreciate that and the good job that you do every week. So what we're trying to do here today is we're going to be explaining to you how the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill will that was signed into law on Monday with a great deal of fanfare. And if you follow Washington politics to a great extent, like some people follow the Dodgers, you'll know that this week is infrastructure week. I hope everybody has all their decorations up. But in reality, the federal government and the process, and really it's the national government because we're in a federal system, but the national government and national infrastructure bills operate primarily differently than any other type of budgeting or anything that you would understand. So in the United States, in China, for instance, local governments can run deficits, and this week it was announced that local governments in China hold $7 trillion worth of debt, which means that China actually has 3 to 4 times the amount of public debt that we have, as a for instance. And only 1/3 of the economy to pay that type of public debt. But in the United States, local governments cannot run, so that cities and counties cannot run deficits, nor can their agencies, nor can the state. We've gone through this dozens and dozens and dozens of times. So despite what we may want or not want out of the state government, when the state government says it's going to spend $100 million on the 15 freeway, they are actually going to spend $100 million on the 15 freeway. When the Riverside County Transportation Agency says it's going to spend $2.4 billion on the 91 freeway, it's actually going to spend $2.4 billion on the 91 freeway. As a side note on that, and seeing that Karen is Supervisor Spiegel is on the line, one of the most important and not widely known things has occurred with RCTC and the funding of the 91 freeway and the ongoing improvements. Because we are ahead of schedule on our budgeting locally, RCTC was able to fund itself, fund a bond issuance that allowed them to pay off the federal loan, which enabled the entire 91 project. It did so at lower interest rates, and by doing that in a responsible way, it will save upwards of $40 million over the course of the 91 improvements. $40 million for all of us playing the home game is about one half of an interchange. It's about 2 grade separations for rail, so that people can move through those projects. It's a medium-sized project. It could add, and so that savings goes directly to RCTC so that they could, instead of spending it on interest, a higher interest rate on the federal loan. And it's nothing against the federal government. They loaned us the money at the ongoing market rate at the time. We are in an unprecedented interest rate environment, as we all know. And so very wisely, RCTC, which Supervisor Spiegel serves on as one of the 5 county supervisors. She's our county supervisor. And then Wes Speak serves as the city of Corona's representative, voted and worked for years to make sure that we were in a situation where locally we were able to save that type of money. So that is a huge accomplishment. It's something that doesn't get recognized very much. And it's something that we really need to recognize Supervisor Spiegel for now and into the future when we see her, because that's what serious agencies do. They, just as you in your business, when you say it's going to cost me $100 and then you go and you spend the $100 and you get the return that you wanted, or the result that you were expecting, that's exactly how most local government agencies, including the county, including RCTC, work. At the federal government, that is not how it works. They are allowed to run deficits, as we well know. And one of the old pieces of advice in Washington are that deficits only matter when your party is out of power. And so that's where one party is right now, and the other party is in control. This infrastructure bill started as a $200 billion infrastructure bill in the Obama administration. At that time, it was known as a clean bill. And that was what we were working towards, was a clean bill. And a clean bill means it is what it would be passed at the state of California. It is what it would be passed if it were the city of Corona. $200 billion for new projects that get spent in a specific period of time. That negotiation worked its way through. Both parties of Congress at different times held power in Congress. Both parties have held the White House for almost an equal amount of time. And what we now have is a $1.2 trillion not clean bill. And this is, and it's an infrastructure bill. And you've heard a lot of things about it, but I'm going to explain now what it means about not clean. That's not a partisan way of describing it. It's a DC way of describing it. And the easiest way is to say this. They took every possible thing that had anything to do with infrastructure that had been paid for in other pieces of legislation, but then other Congresses stole the money, or the administration at the time decided they didn't want to build that project, or whatever happened. All of those stalled projects, put it into a giant ball had a group of economists say, how much is this worth? And they came up with $1.2 trillion. Now, in terms of the infrastructure that you and I use every day, Ontario Airport, 91 Freeway, 15 Freeway, the Prado Dam Complex, the Santa Ana River Complex, water systems, all those different things. The Port of Los Angeles, which I think has been in the news lately. I haven't been following it that closely. The supply chain, all of those pieces of the puzzle. I believe the president, and I only listened to the speech 4 times, so I'm not sure, but he talked about how this was going to drive down inflation because it was going to put $1.2 trillion to work immediately. And it was going to help fix almost immediately the supply chain crisis. So let's on that, open that up. So $1.2 trillion is the cost. How long is the horizon to spend that $1.2 trillion? 2 decades. So right off the bat, if you're thinking that the supply chain crisis will hopefully be solved by Christmas, we can tell that they're planning on this bill stretching out over 21 Christmases. So we're not quite sure which Christmas will get the gift of a supply chain fix, but we know it's coming at some point. And then you dig into it and you say, okay, what is actually being fixed of the things that I would consider, or anyone would consider, infrastructure? Well, there's about $110 billion of that 1.2 trillion is actually going to be spent on infrastructure that we would recognize. Roads that need to be fixed, bridges that need to be fixed. In fact, the president spent a lot of time talking about 2 scenario where a bridge goes out and an ambulance can't get through in a snowstorm to a hospital. It was a very touching story. And so that's one of the scenarios he's trying to avoid. That type of infrastructure. It's $110 billion. Out of a $1.2 trillion bill. So immediately your antenna may go up over that. Now, outside of that, $66 billion additionally is going to be spent on new rail for Amtrak. Now, Amtrak carries in 1 year what a medium-sized airport services in a year. So it's a very, very small portion of the mix for the commercial movement of people and goods across the United States. If anyone has ever been on Amtrak, I have taken it across the country both ways. I can tell you it is the longest 96 hours of your life. And if you really want to spend time on a sighting in North Dakota, take the northern route, because I got to spend 24 unscheduled hours there. It was a real eye opener. So, but $66 billion is given to Amtrak specifically to replace airline traffic. It's not to build new infrastructure. It's specifically to study ways to take over the airline industry. So the big plan here, so they're spending more money on Amtrak times at least 4 than they're spending on ports, then they're spending on other rail, then they're spending on bridges, and they're spending on airports. So when you're looking at priorities, I don't think everyone would list Amtrak first. So that's a sincere problem with this. And Anthony, going to the next slide. So then you go and look at the view from California. So we can see there was a great study that's done at the end of each legislative cycle by the California Chamber of Commerce, where they go out and they ask 10,000 regular Californians what their priorities are. And what you can see here is that all the priorities for the state are listed. And you can see that most people, that the awareness, which is the left side of that chart, and the demand is on the right side of that chart. So you can answer every question, yes, that for you, everything is a priority. Or you could answer only 1 or 2 or 3 issues or priorities. And what you can see here is that there is a huge awareness for COVID-19, as you can imagine. There is a huge awareness on fighting global warming. You can see that there is a huge awareness on addressing homelessness and wildfire protection. But that as you move to the right and you look at the demand, that what you're seeing here is that over 80% of California voters see fixing roads as a priority, as a high priority. That over 84% rate securing and expanding the water supply as a very high priority. That over 83% see reducing crime as a very high priority, and that over 80% place economic development as a very high priority. And so this is where our platform, all the work we do comes in. We take partisanship out of it, and we look at what are the things that are going to help you employ more people today, tomorrow, the next day. How do we get them to work? How do we help you keep them healthy? How do we keep the economy expanding? How do we do all of these different pieces? And on this chart, as you can see, are a number of different things. And you can see that everybody wants everything, essentially, because none of the priorities listed here is much under 50%. But when you look at where the biggest demand is, it's in infrastructure, because we all feel it every day. And so going on to the next chart, let's jump in a little bit more specifically into what the next slide, Anthony, what happened. So as we've discussed, $66 billion to replace air travel with trains. Now, having worked on intermodal rail service for 30 years, I can tell you that the amount of infrastructure spending on trains and what are known as multimodal situations, where you have buses and trains and trucks and all of this, has been unprecedented in American history. And I can also tell you that ridership has gone from 1.8% of Americans using those modes of transportation on an annual basis down to 0.8%. So we are spending an unprecedented amount. We're spending hundreds of billions of dollars over a decade on trains and buses and all of those different items. And people are looking at that and saying, I'm going to take a car instead. I'm going to take a plane instead. And so and this is where the inefficiency in the system is coming in, unfortunately. There has not been a magic tipping point. There has not been a hockey stick where, you go across and then boom, Jeff Miller wakes up in the morning and says, oh my God, I drive a car to work. That's not going to happen. Right. And so this is what we've been dealing with since the early 1990s. This is not something that is new. It is something that even predates all of us in this conversation. So, but here are the disappointing things to me as an advocate for more infrastructure. That does not mean just more roads. That means more infrastructure, smarter infrastructure. So you get into the bill, and this is what you see: $66 billion to replace air travel with trains. Okay, we're not talking about moving more people, because we can all say that when we show up to the airport, we don't ever go, wow, where did all the people go? This system is so efficient that I can actually sit in a middle row if I show up an hour and a half early for my flight. This is not what we're finding. What we're finding are everything is overcrowded, and things aren't working as they have been advertised. But so we're spending $66 billion, and again, humanities major, but it seems like that's a lot of money, not to increase the ability of the entire system to handle more people, but actually replace one mode of traffic that's handling it efficiently with one that 100 years ago we decided was inefficient. That's just facts. Going on, $15 billion are to place electric charging stations in major cities. Now, again, this needs to happen because we have laws on the books that by 2045, we are going to have a carbon neutral country. So as we've talked about before, there's a political process. Somebody wins, somebody loses. The people that win get to develop a policy. And that's where we step in to work on that policy. Now, on this bill, this $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill, which was passed by bipartisan support, 250 or so Democrats, 215 in the House, with 19 or 13 Republicans, and then 19 U.S. senators from the Republican side joined in the U.S. Senate. But $15 billion in public funds for new electric charging stations in major cities across the country. Now, we as electric ratepayers already pay for charging stations, whether we have an electric car or not. Every ratepayer in the United States pays an additional fee already to put electric charging stations all over the country, even if there aren't electric cars in very large numbers in those areas. So on top of that fee that we already pay, we're going to be spending $15 billion. And here again, it's not to add new capacity to an already overloaded system. It's specifically designed to exchange one method for another, which is an extremely expensive thing to do. And you should look at the economic benefits and the environmental benefits of doing that. And it gets to be a tough argument. And so now you come down to, okay, so how much is this really going to cost us? Well, it's going to add over 10 years, it's going to add $450 billion to the federal deficit. And again, not here to bang on the deficits are bad or good or otherwise. It's just a fact. It's scored as costing us $450 billion over 10 years. Okay, so what does that mean? Lots of bills have what are known as pay-goes or set-asides or different ways of raising revenue, or you're cutting one project and then using the money to pay, right? This bill does none of that. It pays for it out of new money. So then you have to ask yourself, if it adds $450 billion to the deficit over 10 years, and it is not approaching any new revenue source, how is it going to spend $1.2 trillion anytime soon? And the answer is it's not. That you're actually going to be spending $450 billion over the next 10 years. Well, what was the round amount that was going to be spent by the Obama plan and then the Trump plan as proposed? About $450 billion. So where does the other money come in? The other $750 billion. Well, let's dig into that. So it allows the federal government for the first time to allow foreign steel to be considered, which means used, in construction projects. For instance, in the state of California, you cannot have your construction project include foreign steel in it for obvious reasons. Now, your car can be made of foreign steel, different ornamental pieces of your business can be made of foreign steel, but the girders and the rebar cannot. Well, this bill allows the federal government to create a pilot project that does that. This for over 100 years has been considered a vital part of the American Self-Defense Act. This is because you want to be able to make sure that the rebar that is in your bridge within the concrete, you want to make sure that the girder that's holding up your building is exactly what is built by someone in the United States. So that's one of the things that's in the bill. The second piece is budgeting $500 million. And for a lot of people, that's a lot of money. In the city of Corona, that's about 4 years of the local budget. Studying the racial history of roads in America and prioritizing roads to be removed. So that's something, again, if this bill is supposed to be expanding infrastructure, we're prioritizing roads for removal. And then because it does not account for any offsets or any other funding source, what you're going to end up with is that grab bag of projects that have never been funded before that will likely not be not be funded into the future. And so that's what we're at. We're basically getting the bill that was promised starting in 2014, and we're getting that bill today with some ups and extras. So with that, I'm happy to discuss things with you and go from there.
Thank you, Jeff. Do we have any questions for him?
There are no questions specifically. However, Jeff Miller did ascertain that he wanted to talk with Jeff Gibson regarding
Fairbox
recovery.
recovery. Yeah. I see where you're going. Okay, so Fairbox recovery. So for mass transit, if you have ever been sitting in traffic and watched a bus drive by, and you think that other than the bus driver and it being a bus, it probably didn't qualify to be in the HOV lane, there is a actual thing called Fairbox recovery. Fairbox recovery means that if every seat is filled on a train, every seat is filled on a bus, every seat is filled on an airline, how much money does that actually recover from the operating costs? Obviously, for an airplane, having the plane full means that it can run at a profit. Usually, if a plane is more than half full, it can run at a profit. Southwest has got it down to if they have 50 people on a 137 person plane, it can run at a profit. So that's their Fairbox recovery level. For trains, you recover 18 cents on the dollar. So that means that as more people get on the train, you actually lose more money. And the same is true for buses. And so what you're getting with $66 billion of new Amtrak money, and remember, Amtrak was formed when the Central Pennsylvania Railroad went bankrupt in 1970. I can't tell you why it went bankrupt in 1970 because I wasn't born yet, but I can tell you it was the Central Pennsylvania Railroad went bankrupt. And we were absolutely certain that the United States of America would end as an ongoing entity. So on as an emergency basis, the federal government under President Richard Nixon came up with Amtrak on the spot. Since the end, it was supposed to be paying for itself, but of course it wasn't because it was bankrupt. From that time to today, it has never run a profit, obviously, because it was designed to come out of bankruptcy within 6 months and never need federal funding again. Now, obviously, if we're giving it $66 billion to largely expand outside of the Northeast, there's a problem. And the problem is Fairbox recovery, where airlines run at a general profit. And when you can have things like a major bailout of the airline industry, for instance, a one-time bailout because you shut down the entire economy, and that costing the federal government about $15 billion, and you have to think, wait, they serve 500 million trips a year, and when you shut them down entirely, they only needed about 15 billion to make it through. That seems like they're making some money. But you have Amtrak, like I said, competes with Ontario Airport for the number of people it moves every year, is getting $66 billion. And if they are successful in their project, that means that 82 cents of every dollar they charge in fares comes out of our pocket on an ongoing basis. And that is what's known as Fairbox recovery. Did I hit that, Mr. Miller? You're muted.
Yes, it did. And I think it's important to point out that without the local infrastructure like a Metrolink, it virtually makes it impossible to utilize Amtrak efficiently.
Yes, yeah, it doesn't work in any possible sense. And I'm not pitching against it. It's just, this is why for years when we were looking at this state has spent over $15 billion looking at high-speed rail. We've looked at high-speed rail all over the place. The problem is that the countries where high-speed rail works, for instance, one, have had massive problems, huge overruns, and issues that we would never be willing to tackle here. A number of the lines in China have had serious problems, or run between ghost cities as test projects. In any case, yeah, fare box recovery is a real thing. It's an ongoing issue. You're just creating another government program that's going to cost more and more and more and more. And there are much more efficient ways to move people, clearly, because they've been developed over the last 100 years. And if rail was efficient, it would have been the solution. So, anything else?
There are no other questions.
Did we beat infrastructure and our audience senseless?
There are no other questions.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much, Jeff, for providing us with those critical updates. As always, you can reach out to your local representatives, Assemblymember Sabrina Cervantes and Senator Richard Roth, both of whose contact information is provided on your screen. Before we end today's program, let me share with you about those who were on the call today. We have Riverside County Supervisor Karen Spiegel, Brad West representing Assemblymember Sabrina Cervantes, Norco College President Dr. Monica Green, former State Assembly member, former Corona City Mayor and Council member, and Jeff Miller, former Corona Mayor and Citizen of the Year Jason Scott, and Pete Cervantes from Riverside County Office of Education. Thank you all for joining us today. We'd once again like to thank today's sponsor, Jim Dorsey Photography. Whether you need a photographer for a wedding, a portrait, or an event, Jim Dorsey is experienced in it all. He is extremely patient, understanding, flexible, and most of all, fun. Learn more at jdorseyphotography.com. If you would like to sponsor a future business briefing, please contact the Chamber. We will not be having a call next week, so we would like to wish everyone a happy and safe holiday. We will, however, be back on Wednesday, December 1st, discussing the year ahead as California is considering ending many Prop 13 protections. If you would like to rewatch any part of today's program or would like to share it with others, it can be found on our Chamber's YouTube page. Thank you everyone for attending. Our meeting is adjourned.